Hello, everybody. This is John McDonald. Everything is gay, even the straight stuff is ready for Halloween. And there was no better way to kick off Gay Christmas, as we have started calling it recently, than with a special edition, much like last year with The Craft and the season premiere, where I had a friend burst into our Mad Max Fury Road episode. I am here today with a good friend to talk about one of our favorite movies. This is my friend Elizabeth, who does a lot of tabletop gaming with me and has amazing, super cool hair color choices. You can't see them, but just imagine the coolest shade of electric blue. And that's the vibe that we've got going on. So, hi, welcome, Elizabeth. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm excited as well. There is a secret word, and if you say a secret word, not purple, green goo will fall on you, a la you can't do that on television. So try not to say the secret word.
Oh, that's exciting. I kind of want to say the secret word now.
Yes, but it's a secret word. It's so secret, I don't even know what it is. So if
Oh,
it just happens, it'll happen.
oh, that's very exciting.
So today we're going to kick off Halloween with a now queer classic, a cult classic, a classic that was almost not a classic if it hadn't had starting run on TV. It kind of has the same path in life as It's a Wonderful Life, which was also not a classic until it ran on TV. We are going to talk today about 1985's Clue. Yes.
I love
Um,
that movie so much.
Yes. I presented you with a whole bunch of different options. I was like, we could do the end of summer, we could do horror movies. We share a love for some variations of found footage. Why did we end up going with Clue? Why do you say that you love Clue? What draws you to Clue?
Oh, so many things. When I was a kid, it was my favorite board game ever. I have always loved whodunits. I love murder mysteries. I love Tim Curry and Christopher Lloyd. So when I saw the movie, I was just immediately in love with it for that reason alone. And it's just such a fun, kind of silly movie that just, I don't know, it just always makes me so happy to watch. It's just fun, the whole thing.
Yeah, no, we love fun here at Everything is Gay and the Straight Stuff. Um, that's something interesting. When people talk about the movie, they often talk about kind of the clash between the zaniness of it, the pratfalls, the, slapping of Mrs. Peacock. They talk about the zaniness versus the house that's supposed to be this house of horrors. That was something audiences didn't really resonate with when it came out in '85. They found that dissonance very jarring, but people of our age group that saw it on like Comedy Central and on Showtime and other places, they actually really understood about the juxtaposition of the scary house with the hilarious falls and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The house to me just kind of makes the movie because the characters themselves, it is very comedic the way they interact with one another, and then that whole like creepy house backdrop with the dogs like always like snarling and barking, it just really kind of helps to kind of offset the comedy for me. And
Yeah.
it just, I don't know, it just makes it an interesting contrast between the two.
Is it in your top 10 haunted houses, though, is the question.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say actually yes.
Yes.
I would think so.
The only problem with it is it only has one bathroom on the main floor because we see a shower on the second floor, but as
Mm-hmm.
far as we can tell, there's only one bathroom, and it's like a half bath on the first floor.
And
So
it is a really tiny half bath at that.
it's true. Maybe that's just why you don't make monkey brains in New England houses, really.
Yeah, that was not a I was not a fan of that choice for dinner.
Yeah. That is one of my favorite. So the scene around the bathroom is one of my favorite exchanges in the film. The Tim Curry fall into my arms, Aline Brennan falls through his arms. I think is a pretty genius piece of physical comedy.
That is one of my favorite scenes as well. I love that, and I love the whole Tim Curry saying that we need to find out who did it, where they did it, and what they did it. Like the whole like theme of Clue, like, where
Yeah.
did they do it, who did it, and what did they do it with? Like that whole like conversation just makes me happy.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, is because there are variations on the movie poster where they show the people in the different windows of the house.
Mm-hmm.
One of those does have the very top of it has the we need to find out who killed him, where, and with what,
Mm-hmm.
in that order. And that's one of the more rare kind of, I guess, European, for lack of better terminology. I don't actually know where it premiered, but that's one of the more rare posters of it. Most of us, if we have the DVD, have the version that's just the straight house with the characters in the window, but there is supposed to be writing on top of that, which I think makes the poster.
I meant to grab mine so I could have it with me while we were doing this, and I forgot it's all the way over there. But now I'm curious. I don't remember which one I have. I think that's the one that I have, though. It's just
Yeah,
without the words on it.
this is a movie that took quite a bit to get made. It was a movie that had to recast. It was a movie that had a co-writer and a new director. It was a movie that wasn't received well originally in theaters because people hated the you'll have to come back to see the other endings. Some theaters
Yeah.
spoiled the endings for other people too. Like they would announce which ending was being shown at the
Oh.
start of the film. So like by the time in 86 it came out on home video, people were kind of over it. Um, there is a really great YouTube video done by Pushing Up Roses about the history of Clue.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage people to see that in conjunction with kind of our conversation here, because she did a really great job talking about the history of it, almost as good as any of the books. Um, but let's start with kind of the background of it. So it is directed, Clue is a 1985, Wikipedia calls it an American black comedy mystery film. It was directed by Jonathan Lynn. And Jonathan Lynn has really one other big credit to his name. He's done a couple of things, but the biggest other credit to his name is My Cousin Vinny in 1992. Um, did you ever see My Cousin Vinny?
I I actually just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I got fussed at. I have not actually seen. I know about it. I've just never
Yeah,
actually seen My Cousin Vinny.
yeah. So kind of the link I think with um, Jonathan Lynn's body of work when we think about it, because Jonathan Lynn also did Sergeant Bilko, The Fighting Temptations, and something called Yes Prime Minister, which I'm not really sure what it is, but Clue and I would argue My Cousin Vinny are kind of his biggest things. And there's that scene in the courtroom in My Cousin Vinny with the kind of eccentric cousin who is a savant of tire wheels. Um, that kind of makes me feel like I'm watching Legally Blonde with the perm thing. But there's something about how Jonathan Lynn directed women, I think, that you can see in Clue. Miss Scarlet is very self-actualized and very knowledgeable. Um, why not? I love getting presents from strange men. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I want on my tombstone, kind of thing. Yeah,
I love I love the way the women are in the movie because each one of them is very what is the word that I'm looking for? Confident, I guess, in their, especially for the time, because like in the 80s a lot of times you would see um women in more of like a housewife role or something like that. And Miss Scarlet especially, like she is very much, you know what, this is who I am, and you know what, I'm okay with that.
Uh, yeah, in the 80s, the only other really strong female characters you could maybe potentially do Jamie Lee Curtis in A Fish Called Wanda. That might have been in the 90s. But yeah, except for like stuff that I've lost her name, stuff that Goldie Hawn was doing, like Private Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
But she had, which she did with Eileen Brennan. but she had to start her own production company in order to do strong female self-possessed characters.
Right.
Um, Actually, also Jamie Lee Curtis in Trading Places would be a good one, which is a great segue into the
Yeah.
work of John Landis, who co-wrote this movie. Um, John Landis has some really famous credits. He's arguably is the most famous non-actor on this production. So if I said John Landis, can you think of any of the movies he's done before I
Blues
kind of
Brothers.
rattle off this list? All right. Also,
Blues
Blues Brothers
Brothers.
2000. He did both of
Yep.
them actually. He was also responsible for, in 1978, Animal House, 1981, An American Werewolf in London, which is arguably one of the best werewolf films ever made.
Absolutely.
In 1983, he did Trading Places and Twilight Zone, the movie. In
Hmm.
1985, when Clues came out, that was also the year he did Spies Like Us. And then in 86, he followed them both up with Three Amigos. In 88, he did Coming to America. In 94, he did Beverly Hills Cop 3. And he's done some stuff on TV, like the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids TV show, which I kind of love. Um,
Weird Science too, I think.
Weird Science. Did he do the Weird Science TV show, or did he do? I don't see it in his discography, but I would not be surprised something. He did the
He was just the
Kentucky
executive
Fried movie, but
producer
yeah.
for the TV
Um,
series. That's what it was.
he also had a cameo in like the Muppets Take Manhattan, which is kind of nice. But yeah, so he has a lot of yeah, it says he did Weird Science, but he did like Weird Science the TV show and Sliders the TV show.
Hmm.
So yeah. So there's a lot of interesting thought behind the scenes even before we get in front of the camera. Ironically enough, even though he's not famous for this movie, he probably didn't claim this movie in '85 because it wasn't received well. So it's really bolstered by Spies Like Us and Three Amigos. And it's just kind of there in the center of his career. So yeah. And then we also have Deborah Hill. She helped produce this, and Deborah Hill um, is mostly known for working with John Carpenter. She did Halloween, she did The Fog, Escape from New York, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which would have been a better received movie if it had been just Season of the Witch. She did The
Agreed.
Dead Zone. Oh, sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you about Season of the Witch.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things that I learned from Shudder. Is if it had just been Season of the Witch, it probably would have been loved. I love the concept of it too. Um, yeah, but Deborah Hill has done a bunch of. She did horror movies with like Carpenter and Cronenberg, and then she transitioned into adventures in babysitting and Big Top Pee Wee and Escape from LA. So she actually kind of went the opposite of what I think most people go from something to horror, but she started in horror and kind of branched out. And just again, in the middle of her kind of filmography, it's just hanging out there is Clue, which I kind of love. So course, there's a whole bunch of behind the scenes stuff that most people know, but I'm happy to share if you don't know this kind of thing. Do you know who was originally cast to portray Miss Scarlet?
I do not actually.
Carrie Fisher was cast to portray Miss Scarlet, but that was when she went to rehab, so she wasn't able to make it into the film. This is one of those tidbits that they shared on the Clue documentary that got fan made and got
Hmm.
released. But it like the film shows like Carrie Fisher drug use, and so there are people that don't really care for the documentary. But Carrie Fisher was originally going to portray Miss Scarlet, and there were two other contenders for Wadsworth the Butler, and originally it was Tim Curry was not the first pick. The first pick, I don't have an IMDb for him. He's not very well known. But the second pick before Tim Curry is pretty well known. Do you know who the kind of famous pick for Wadsworth would have been?
I do not.
It was almost Rowan Atkinson, who's
Really?
Mr. Bean. Yeah, but they didn't think enough people in America knew Rowan Atkinson, so they didn't bring him across, and they ended up doing Tim Curry, of course. In '85, Tim Curry would have been known for the Rocky Horror Show. He was a
Mhm.
Broadway actor, so he would have been known for Camelot. I don't think he had done Legend or anything like that yet. He wasn't really the huge, big character actor we think of. But this is, I think Clue was probably one of his first really big roles.
It's
Um,
apparently his favorite of all of the roles that he's done.
which is saying something because he originated Dr. Frank, because he played the original Dr. Frank
Yeah.
in the stage production. Um, Here's another fun fact for you and all of our fans. There was a famous horror actor that was supposed to write the original screenplay. Do you want to guess about which kind of famous actor? Or do you know this? That looks like the face of
I
something. This is something you know.
I knew it until you said it. I can't remember. Uh um crap. It's gone. What is his
Gone.
name? It's
Just
gone.
like Janet Leigh in the shower, it's gone. Anthony Perkins was going to
Yes.
write the screenplay,
Ah,
but the script ultimately got finished by the director, Jonathan Lynn. The script, of course, does contain, and the book that was made about the movie has this, there is that scrapped fourth ending that was filmed. In one of the documentaries, it said that the fourth ending was a Professor Plum ending, but apparently in the Wikipedia, the ending focuses more on Wadsworth trying for perfection. I can see why you'd like it because the ending of it is him getting attacked by the Dobermans in the back of the cop car. But I
mhm.
can see where it wouldn't fit in with the rest of the film.
Yeah.
I would like to have seen an ending that was Colonel Mustard centric because Martin Mull plays a really great hapless buffoonish character. So it would have been really great if the scrapped ending had been because there's no idea that they did an ending for each of the six main characters, but I would have loved to seen a Colonel Mustard ending
Me too.
myself. Yeah. Um, I will say when I was little, the first time I saw the movie, I was obsessed with the death of the greeter that comes to the door, the singing telegram girl.
Hmm.
That was
Yeah.
my favorite. That was my favorite death. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I always liked that one.
yes. I think it's something about singing and then being shocked, which I really appreciate. All right. So that's kind of the background stuff. And now we can talk about the stuff that most people kind of know. They when they think about the movie, they think about these characters. I always said if I could get a group of seven people together, it would be really fun to go as the main cast. If you have nine people, you can also add in Yvette the maid and Mr.
Mhm.
Body. If you were to do a um, if you were to do a group cosplay for this, who would you want to portray and why?
I would have to say, I think it would probably be Miss Scarlet. She's always been my favorite. Um, I am always drawn to the more, I guess, the more confident characters. I really like how she is very unapologetically um, running this business. Um, and she has no shame in the fact that she's basically running this uh, escort service. And I just really like that. And I like the the kind of confidence and almost like snarkiness of her character. And I think that's who I would probably cosplay as.
I think too it helps that Leslie Ann Warren is so good at being this character. The other big Leslie Ann Warren character, of course, is the woman in Victor Victoria. That's kind of the other Leslie Ann Warren
Mm-hmm.
character I think of. But here she plays this really great, funny kind of sex pot character. I also love the candlestick kind of mirroring her curves
Mm-hmm.
because you get a phallic candlestick, but it's also like Miss Scarlet's curves made manifest in this
Mm-hmm.
weapon. And of course, she like opens it while sitting on a desk with her legs exposed. And almost every angle of her that's shot in the film, they have her do when she's not really front on, they do like a nice profile of her so you can kind of see her curves no matter where she is in
Mm-hmm.
the film. And I really like that. Um, yeah. Also, having Miss Scarlet not wear red is an interesting choice. I always wondered about that because I don't think anyone's ever asked the costumer why they chose to do Miss Scarlet in a blue instead of a red.
I read something recently that um none of the characters wear their colors. Um, there's little like nods to their colors here and there. So like Miss
Yeah.
White wears the black, but when she takes off her coat, the inside lining of her coat is white. And like Miss Peacock doesn't wear like the typical peacock colors, but the hat that she wears is kind of like peacock feathers. Um, so they didn't put everybody in their colors, but they gave everybody kind of a nod to that color.
Love that. What did you think of Miss Scarlet's entrance in the film? She's not the first person to arrive at the mansion. She arrives with um,
Professor
Professor
Plum.
Plum. Yeah, and she basically flags him down using her legs. Again, her legs are very focal to this film. So
I loved it. I love that she uses uses what she has, you know. She uses her sexuality to get what she needs and she's okay with that. So I love the fact that she decided to just kind of stick her legs out and show her legs off to get somebody to stop. I love the look that she gives him when they get to the door and he puts his hand on her behind. Like just that look that she gives him is just priceless to me and I love it.
yeah. And then the you just ate whistling Dixie line from the
Mm-hmm.
end when the he's actually called the chief, but he's also kind of the evangelist, depending upon who you ask. But when
Mm-hmm.
Howard Hesseman is like, your souls are in danger, and he's like, you're not just whistling Dixie. I think that's great. I would say probably the one that I would do if I were to do one of the female characters is because I'm not as good as improv as I like to be. I'd probably do Mrs. Peacock. I think Mrs. Peacock, Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Peacock is kind of challenging because she has to almost be the straight character. She is absurd, but Eileen Brennan does this really great thing where she's very pompous through most of the film, but it's a funny sort of pompousness. She tries to be above this whole thing and be shocked when she's been passing bribes in Washington D.C. for years apparently. Um, I am a big fan of Eileen Brennan's body of work. Like I said, in Private Benjamin, she was really great. She was in Miss Congeniality too, Armed and Fabulous. I don't know if anybody remembered that she was in that, but she has been pretty much a working actress for like the longest time. And she's done pretty much every TV show she could do in the time period. Um, and I think probably she's one of the characters who did not get a lot of ad libs, but she sold it for me. So
She was great. I just recently realized that she was also in Jeepers Creepers as the cat lady. I did not realize that was her.
yeah, she has done quite a bit of work in different genres. She's not afraid of doing it for the paycheck. Let me tell you. She was also in. I don't know if this is this version. She was also in the Keanu Reeves version of Babes in Toyland. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, she played Mrs. Piper's, and I can't remember. So Mrs. Piper is sort of that Mother Goose type character. Yeah, she was in the Keanu Reeves, um, Drew Barrymore version of Babes in Toyland with not Christopher Lloyd, Richard Mulligan, who's not Christopher Lloyd, but people think he's Christopher Lloyd. What did you think of Eileen Brennan in this film? Like Mrs. Peacock, who again, who does not wear a lot of blue. She's definitely more in kind of a gold orange outfit. It's
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of colors to it. She gets slapped a bit. She murders a cook off screen because they dare to serve her favorite meal. Which maybe that was the downfall. I guess if you serve monkey's brains, that's what's going to happen to you. Um,
I thought she was fabulous. I loved I loved her being so pompous throughout the whole thing, but she was also really dramatic at times, and I loved that. She would actually be my second choice for somebody to cosplay because I just love like the whole like takes a sip of brandy and then oh maybe they were poisoned by the brandy and just that whole like screaming like the hands in the air just killed me. I thought that was fantastic.
it's a great scream. I love the scream. It's a scream that I can imagine it's very hard to do if they ever did, because I know there are uh Clue nights where they do like a shadow cast of Clue where people dress up and like quote the movie. I've never been to one. I'd love to go to one, but I know people do that. So Mrs. Peacock, I think, is the only character um, that is in the main cast that we don't actually see murder anyone. Um, Even in the version of it where she has done all the killing,
Right.
we don't ever see her even in silhouette in the darkness of the house. I think she's the only person that actually murders someone that we never actually see murder anyone. Because we see Miss Scarlet murder um,
Yep.
a vet. When we see,
We see Miss White murder a vet
yeah,
as well.
um, yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah,
I
I think
think
you're
this.
right.
We also don't see her drive up to the house because when they introduce Mrs. Peacock, uh, she is just introduced after Colonel Mustard has entered.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah, so
Yeah, she just shows up at the door. Yeah, that's right.
she's just the omnipresent. Um, Although her ending is one of my favorites because they do that impromptu for "She's a Jolly Good Fellow" sing along,
Oh, that was amazing.
where Madeline Kahn just starts doing like this whole rendition and those high notes that she does that make me so
Hmm.
happy that she did Not Getting Married Today from Company for one of those Broadway things that she did. Yeah, but I think of the three endings, if I didn't like the other two so much, it would probably be my favorite. The Mrs. Peacock was a man line
Hmm.
uh, is not something that should be discounted because it's delivered with such great aplomb by Michael McKean, who I'm very excited to talk about because I've seen Michael McKean in a lot of things now. But of course, Clue was probably one of his first American projects, I'd want to say. Before we talk about Tim Curry as Wadsworth, because on the IMDb page he has second billing after Eileen Brennan, um, I want to talk a little bit about the score because as Tim Curry arrives, he's kind of ending this magnificent, jaunty, almost sci-fi, but very kind of thunderstormy score. The ba 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 da 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 da
Hmm.
da kind of score. What did you think about the score? Has it stayed with you, or is it like, oh, this is just Clue?
I liked it. I thought it fit the film really well. I thought it fit the mood, especially like in the beginning, when you don't really know what to expect when you're first like the first couple of like scenes where he's trying to like throw the bone to the dogs and stuff. You don't really know what's gonna happen. And the music just kind of feels right, I think. Um it's
Yes.
not something that like I it's not my favorite in a movie, but I think it fit the movie really well and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Uh, John Morris, the composer, had done a lot of work um, kind of on stage and in film. So he had done things like High Anxiety and looks like he did Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. He actually did the theme music for the TV series The French Chef with Julia
Hmm,
Child,
interesting.
which is my funnest tidbit for the day, I believe. He's also has the theme music composer credits for History of the World Part Two. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so John Morris does a lot of this fun, silly, not silly, but fun underscoring um, that has kind of this it's very present in everything. The theme to Blazing Saddles, I'd argue, is one of the things that makes Blazing Saddles work. And I think it works the same as Clue, in which it really does underline the story. So, yeah,
I agree. I would agree with that.
yeah. And it's also great to have because the other big music in Clue, of course, is Shake, Rattle, and Roll, which once you hear it, then you can never get out of your brain
Hmm.
ever again. It's just stuck there. So he has second billing. So we can talk about Tim Curry. Wadsworth is really the center of this movie, and not just because he knows what's going on. I firmly believe Tim Curry's charisma is what Tim Curry is an intriguing actor because he's a character actor, but he has this sort of absurd charisma where you just want to keep seeing him in things. And so I'm glad he plays Wadsworth. It's potentially his most subdued role, I feel like.
I think I would agree with that.
Yeah. He does look great in a butler uniform.
He does. He looks
And he,
fabulous.
and his explanation for what a butler is that a butler buttles is just great. It's he has like three really great Martin Mull exchanges. The are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests exchange is really great. And the what does a butler do exchange is super cool. I really enjoyed it. The sitting here at dinner where he reveals the monkey brain thing that nobody was thinking of, I think was kind of incredible because it's one of the things I always kind of forget is there
Hmm.
until it happens. And he says it was such a sneer, like he didn't know who Mrs. Peacock was when he invited her to the dinner.
What do you think your favorite Tim Curry role is, just in general?
I think because of the subversiveness of it, and I think of how important it is, Tim Curry's most important role is Dr. Frank. I think visually and as a character. I don't want to discount Legend, and I think Wadsworth is really important. I'm just going to look. Actually, one of my favorite things that Tim Curry has ever done. He had a very small role in the movie Congo, and in Congo he
Mhm.
has this very famous line about coffee cake where he says, "Do not touch the coffee cake." And every time I present coffee cake to someone, I think of him. I loved him as Cardinal. I'm going to butcher this.
Richelieu?
Richelieu
Cardinal Richelieu, yeah.
in the oh, I love this One for All and All for Love, the Disney live action Three Musketeers with Chris O'Donnell and the soundtrack and everything. Um, he wasn't Over the Garden Wall, which I struggle with as a series because I know people like it and it's really high art, but I don't get it. But he was in Over the Garden Wall as Auntie Whispers. Um, he was the black toxic goo that I totally have not used as an inspiration in TTRPGs at all from Fern Gully, in which
Oh,
he
that's
sang,
right.
which I loved. Yeah, that one of the best non-Disney villains, I think, probably. Um, he was also in Barbie and the Three Musketeers, by the way,
I did
which is
not
fun.
know that.
He was
I
in an episode of Psych, which might have been there was an episode of Psych that was a celebration of Clue, and he played Nigel St. Nigel in that episode, which I kind of love. He was Nigel Thornberry too in the Wild Thornberries. Um,
He was
yeah,
in an episode of Criminal Minds, and he was so incredible in that episode. He played the bad guy, and he did just an incredible job. He almost didn't even look like himself in the episode. Um, but that's probably one of top 10 favorite Tim Curry performances was that because he just did such an incredible job portraying the guy.
Yeah. I would also encourage people that like Tim Curry, listen to him in Camelot as Lance, because there's a cast recording album of him pretty young in his career in Camelot, which is a show that desperately needs like a rewrite on the music because it really drags in some places. But like there's something about him as this young in love person versus voicing the evil Manta in the Little Mermaid TV series and being the Skullmaster in Mighty Max. Like he has this great versatility to him. And you see it as Wadsworth because even though he's not a physical comedian so much, he does a lot of comedy in this movie and a lot of shepherding. He very much keeps this movie from dragging.
Very much so.
Clue does not drag because Tim Curry will not let Clue drag.
Yeah.
And the exclamation when he dies in the third one where he's like, and he shot me. I think is great because he just wasn't expecting it because the FBI planting um Mr. Green into it. I love that as a subplot. So yeah, that's Tim Curry.
I love Tim Curry.
He's great. He still does Comic Cons every now and then. He's kind of recovered from a stroke. He still does Comic
Mm-hmm.
Cons. I the one Comic Con I was at, I couldn't afford to even stop by and say hello because it's a lot of money to see him,
Yeah.
obviously. But his body of work is so large that if I were to try to do a Tim Curry episode, like it would probably be a four-parter. Because even if you just look at his animated work, like going from Fern Gully into like Pebble and the Penguin, Tim Curry has done a little bit of everything and he always does it with quite a verve. As far as character actor goes, he's up there with Danny Kaye. I would say almost for me. Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yes. Is there anything else you would like to say about Tim Curry, an ode to Tim Curry, before we move forward? Um, yes.
I could say so much. I love him. I think he is incredible. And I agree with you. I think that if we did something, if we kept talking about him, this would be like a four-part because you would have to like break down
Yeah.
animated and then, you could break down like all of his different genres. I just think he was great. I think that um, him as Wadsworth, I don't think anybody else could have done Wadsworth as well as Tim Curry did because he really kind of brought Wadsworth to life for me.
Yeah.
And he did. He kind of moved the whole movie along and did not let anything drag. And I just love him. He's a great actor.
Yeah, and there's also a sense that he is really in the character because when everybody splits off, um, he's still afraid enough of Mrs. White that he's not really willing to lose sight of her. And
Mm-hmm.
so, though he set all this in motion, he is still stuck in his own mousetrap, as it were. And it never feels like Wadsworth is above the movie he's in. It feels like he's created the scenario and then he kind of dooms himself and everybody else in it, even in the one where he's kind of in charge of the end, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something I like about him with Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White, because we're going to transition into Madeline Kahn. Madeline Kahn knows how to hold the stage as well. She had done the stage and transitioned to screen. Her monologue in Paper Moon, her character in Blazing Saddles, her Diet Coke commercial where she plays a ghost. Madeline Kahn, she's not just good at singing. I'd argue she's actually a funnier actress than she is a singer, but she's a great singer as well. Madeline Kahn is the one that improved her flame speech. And the flame speech, I would say, is one of the more gift moments of the film. it's the thing when you say clue, people start doing the flames thing with the hands
Hmm.
on their face. Such the deadpan, earnest, honest delivery. Like she was angry, but it's all inside kind of anger. Madeline Kahn is an unexpected beauty of an actress. And she died too young, and they canceled her show too young. Um, I'm grateful for the things that we have of Madeline Kahn still, but as Mrs. White, playing an unexpected character, because up until this version of Mrs. White in the Clue games, Mrs. White was like the maid character.
Hmm.
And so this version of Mrs. White is so different. And I think it did lead to like later incarnations of Mrs. White in Clue to be not quite so old and stodgy and to give them like a really interesting backstory. Madeline Kahn did all that and more.
I love she was amazing. I loved like the little looks that she would give even when she didn't have any dialogue, like the first time she sees Yvette, like the look that she gives her is just
Yeah.
perfect.
I want people the next time they watch Clue to watch Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White and how she moves physically, because
Hmm.
whenever she is moving or moved in a scene, she does it as if she is a living corpse. I want you to kind of watch her body movements, and she kind of locks herself so everything she does is this really stiff, perpetual funeral thing, unless somebody else is moving her. I don't think she like even bends her elbow at any time throughout this film. Um, and also then she gets to eat soup and she gets into the slurping contest with Professor Plum, and everyone is just staring at them. It's silent. I'd like to envision in the theater was completely silent. Um, yeah. She's also not a prude. Like when she hears about Miss Scarlet's profession, when she sees the double negatives, which we haven't talked about Colonel Mustard, but the double negatives exchange with Wadsworth is really
Hmm.
great. Um, her only complaint is that it's impossible to get into the position.
Yeah.
Madeline Kahn, I also like her as a brunette because in a lot of what she had done, she's kind of like a dirty blonde, I'd say. I really like
Hmm.
her in this black hair, this very severe, not quite Bob, but definitely not a Karen haircut. I really like what they did for Mrs. White here. It was really imaginative. And it really does take the movie in an interesting direction because everybody else is kind of expected in what they do, and Mrs. White is really unexpected.
Hmm. I actually didn't recognize her at first. It took me a little bit to realize that's who was playing her, just because you're so used to seeing her with the lighter hair, just that severe cut and the color. I
Yeah.
didn't even recognize her for a while.
And that opening moment, this is a criticism of this movie. The opening moment with the dog crap that ends up on Wadsworth's shoe that everybody
Hmm.
smells coming into the doorway. Uh, her visceral reaction to it, just the way that she smells that, like, that's just pure physicality. Like, that's really hard to do with the face. And just the way she reacts to it, but doesn't.
Hmm.
I really loved her reaction to the dog do the most. Next on the list is the person that arrived with no Scarlet. It's Professor Plum. Discuss.
I Christopher Lloyd's another. I adore him so much, and I love him in this movie. He was a little cringy at times in this movie, which I actually kind of liked because I thought he did it really well. But I don't know. I thought he was great as Professor Plum.
And he is not a forensic expert.
No.
Um, so, not quite as extensive as Tim Curry's body of work. Christopher Lloyd has done a lot that we love. Do you have a favorite Christopher Lloyd role that you can think of?
So I have two. I love him as Uncle Fester in Addams Family. Um, And I know a lot of people would say their favorite is Back to the Future. And I agree, it's a great movie. He did an awesome job as Dr. Brown. My absolute favorite all time Christopher Lloyd role as is Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
As they should be. I think those are great. I really love Christopher Lloyd. Surprisingly, there was a movie called The Tender Bar, which is based upon his coming of age book, and he played the grandpa in it. And The Tender Bar is really moving. It's really great. I do think him in Back to the Future, you can't really avoid it. I think he's pretty good in Back to the Future. He played Master Xenohort in Kingdom Hearts 3. So he's actually part of the Disney Kingdom Hearts franchise, which I kind of love.
He's also Rasputin in Anastasia, which I really love that too.
Yes. In the dark of the night, people we will find her. Yes. He was in Over the Garden Wall as well. He was the voice of the
I didn't know that.
woodsman. So yes, if you love Clue, you may also love Over the Garden Wall. He was in Raising Hope, which was one of my favorite uh, 2010s sitcoms that almost no one saw. Raising Hope, he's really great in that. And then, of course, he's done Back to the Future and all the versions of that. He was in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He is uncredited, but IMDb has found that credit. He plays one of the Santa Clauses from the 2009 season. Um, I loved him actually. Christopher Lloyd in the remake of My Favorite Martian with Jeff Daniels, and he
Yeah.
plays the Martian. Um, there's an exuberance that matches his role here. His role here as Professor Plum is more subdued. I'd argue he's one of the less poppy of the guests, but there's something about his general optimism and professionalism that you can see. Professor Plum doesn't see a problem with what he did and what he's paying for, and you never get the sense that he really feels much contrition about it. When he's like, "Who did I kill?" Like, there's no sorrow in the fact that he tries to off Mr. Body twice and succeeds once. Um, there's something interesting about Professor Plum here as a character that I think both succeeds, but also is the least big personality in this film. Um, I'd argue if you took Professor Plum out of this movie, it wouldn't work because he's part of the Clue universe. But you could almost take him out of this movie, and except for going down to the basement and all of Eileen Brennan's reactions to that, he's not really in the second half of the movie, except for the fact that he's in the first half of the movie for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Or maybe it's also just because I love Michael McKean as Mr. Green a lot. Uh, so I love the shot of Vet and Mr. Green, the homosexual, who we don't know is not a homosexual, standing at the landing of the attic, looking up, and this is an awful like shot. And if I were a student doing this student work, there's no way a professor would allow this. But it's just like up both of their nostrils, and they're like at this weird angle facing each other, and they push each other up the stairs. And what I think about Yvette the Maid in Clue, that's one of the scenes I think about. I think Mr. Green is one of the successes of this film. People that love this film also quote, my friend especially that loves this film often quotes, "I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife," to me at different times and spaces. Um, the slapping of Mrs. Peacock, the breaking of the table during the announcement,
Yeah.
I think is great. And I don't know if that was a prop table or if it's just a table that broke, but whatever the case may be, it's
But
a
even
great
leading up
moment.
to the table breaking, like when he's trying to sit down and every time he turns around, somebody has like snuck in and sat down behind him. That
Nobody's
whole like
sitting. Yeah,
interaction is
yeah.
great.
They sandwich him between two dead bodies because there's just nowhere to sit anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so in the way that Professor Plum fails, Mr. Green has a very subtle performance in a way that I think still works. He's very present in the second half of the film, Uh, the only time it doesn't work is in one of the endings. There's a Mr. Green that is like doing like a prayer pose that I don't really like. I
Yeah,
think it might be in I think it might be in Mrs. Peacock's ending, but
I think so.
that's a very minor complaint about how well. And of course, Michael McKean is now known as being part of the troupe of people that do the mockumentary movies. So you think about A Mighty Wind. You think about This Is Spinal Tap. He was in Better Call Saul, which I didn't know. He was in Grace and Frankie. He was in At Home with Amy Sedaris, which I think is hilarious. He also plays Doug Forsett in The Good Place, the only human in a long time to get into The Good Place. But most people know him from his kind of quirkier films, So like This Is Spinal Tap, A Mighty Wind, the dog movie that I can't remember the title of right now. Um,
I think my favorite movie that he's been in, or just my favorite of his work in general, is Coneheads.
yeah, I love that. The Coneheads was a moment in time that's very. It's easy to explain, but it's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
We don't really have time for it. Uh, yeah, but what's interesting is the more we look at the main actors of this film, the more we see just a whole bunch of credits of people that aren't afraid of doing the work. Like if you look at Michael McKean, he's in the Brady Bunch movie, and then that same year he did an episode of The Nanny, and an episode of Friends, and an episode of something called The Pompatus of Love. But he was also a voice in Dinosaurs, um, and all
I
the
forgot
versions of
about
Spinal
that.
Tap that have come out. He was in Murder She Wrote, and so you can really see the idea. Oh, he was also in the Short Circuit films. Not all of them, but he was in at least one of them. So you can really see a whole bunch of actors that really respect the process of working. And why I'm kind of mentioning this right now is I'm a big proponent of being pro union, and having the actors strike right now is so important and special, and I very much support them. And I can just imagine. I'm not sure. I think Michael McKean is still around. I can imagine Michael McKean is somewhere on the lines, creating a picket line. Um, but yeah, most people think about Michael McKean. They think about the mockumentary work, but like all the big names in this film, there's a lot of work. Martin
Mm-hmm.
Mull, who we're going to talk about next, is Colonel Mustard. Martin Mull was perfect as vice principal and then Principal Willard Kraft. We did in the two-parter Sabrina the Teenage Witch episode I did in season one. We talked quite a bit about Martin Mull, um, and I really enjoyed his performance as Colonel Mustard. He's a buffoon, but it's not a buffoon that gums up the works of the film. Sometimes a buffoon character can really get in the way of the film. Jerry Lewis kind of built a career around being a buffoon that gets in the way. But like sometimes Eddie Murphy in his films where he plays kind of a buffoon, well intentioned, goes too far.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that with Colonel Mustard and Martin Mull. He's very active. He does not know what's going on, and he's trying so hard to find out. Um, he really sells it when he gets locked in with the motorist that he bashed over the head, in most of the versions. And this is the one character where, when you said they don't wear their colors, I'm surprised because he wears a lot of golds and goldenrod browns in his costume. So I definitely thought Colonel Mustard was dressed more in mustard tones, I
Yeah, he
think.
was the only one that was close, but even his was still more brown than the
Yeah.
gold. Um, but yeah, no, he was amazing. I love all of his interactions, like the whole when he was trying to figure out if anybody else was in the house. That whole interaction with Tim Curry just cracked me up.
The egg, the overhammered egg metaphor about breaking yolks. is great. His the wrench that he gets, I think the wrench is the only tool that's dirty. And because
Hmm.
we find out later in the movie he's dirty, I really like that as like a piece of like a foreshadowing that I'm not sure how was intentional. But his wrench is the only really dirty weapon. So yeah. Um, is there anything that you want to say about a vet or Mr. Body or any of the people that die? Jane Weidland is the singing telegram girl for anyone interested. Jeffrey Kramer plays the motorist. Kelly Nakahara plays Mrs. Ho, the cook. And Bill Henderson is the cop that says, "No, I'm not on duty." Um, Jane Wineland is also known for Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure
Hmm.
and was in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. And for those who don't know which one, that's the one with the whale.
I like. There's a fun fact about Mr. Body, the actor who played Mr. Body. His name is Leaving.
Leaving. Yes, what a
Leaving.
great name. What a great
So
name.
the joke was that they hired him for this movie so they could say Mr. Body is leaving soon. Leaving. And I don't know why. I just think that's hilarious for some reason. That has always stuck with me.
I was
Um,
captivated slightly by his costuming. He wears those black and white shoes,
mhm,
and I think about those shoes all the time. Um, there's something we find out later in the juxtaposition that he is actually Mr. Body's butler, but there's something about how they dressed him up to be flashy, how he tries to escape. He has very strong energy in this film, and so does Yvette. So even though they are murdered and they are secondary characters, I feel like Yvette and Mr. Body getting billing with the first characters is kind of the correct way to go.
yeah, I really liked Yvette. I liked the whole her screaming in the billiard room and then them trying to figure out why she was screaming. She's because there's the murderer. Where's the
You
murderer? Right here.
you locked me up with the murderer, you idiot!
I just
The
love
the
that.
vague European accent, which is
Yeah.
really great. Um, yeah, there's Yvette is a great character and probably one that if you got a group of people to do glue together, I could easily see someone being like, "Why can't I be Yvette
Mhm.
instead of the main cast?" Because it would be an easier thing to put together. She has some really snappy lines. She is also in the same mousetrap, and it gets sprung on her. And I think of all of the people that die, I she has the most sympathy from
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have this really fun idea. I know we're getting close to the ending, but I have this really fun idea to make Clue, and I hate saying it like this because it's a game, but to turn it
Yeah,
into like a murder mystery role playing game where everybody dresses up like one of the characters, and then you roll like a six-sided dice, almost like Blades in the Dark, to get the information. So like if you roll a 1 to a 3, you get like two lies and a truth, and you have to use all the other information that you have to figure out what the truth is.
yeah.
Like a 4 and a 5 would be one truth and one lie, and then a 6 would be you get a real piece of truth, and you have to figure out who actually like killed the person, where, and with what, based on the dice
Yeah.
rolls that you get.
There is a version of Clue that has a TTRPG film that is more of an escape room version that's a board game.
Oh,
And I can
okay.
send you that Amazon link. It looks really
Yeah.
interesting. People agree with you about that. I think you could. Cortex Prime, Thirsty Sword Lesbians would both be great systems for that. Um, People have been trying to capture the energy of Clue since it came out in '85 and then became a cult phenomenon. Um, since 2011, people have been announcing that they're going to do a remake of Clue. Ryan Reynolds' people were involved, Channing Tatum's people were involved. Um, Basically, since 2011 up until February 2020 and then August 2022, people have been wanting to kind of capture this again. And a few of the notable names involved in wanting to recapture this is people like James Bobbin, which if you're a fan of the Ali G show or Flight of the Conchords, who he co-created, or the 2011 The Muppets film, or Alice Through the Looking Glass, James Bobbin was to find he. So James Bobbin was reportedly in talks with 20th Century Studios to direct, along with Oren Uziel, who had done one of the escape room movies and the 2021 Mortal Kombat and the Lost City screenplay with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. And so I feel like they're trying to capture this movie, but they're trying to make it more like the House on Haunted Hill or the 13 Ghosts film, where it's more of a haunted house experience and less about the comedy. Do you think it would work if it's not a comedic film?
I'm really torn by that because I don't know. I would love to see it as more of a horror type or suspense type film. Um, but I don't know if it would be received well that way. And I don't know that they could pull it off.
And the luck of it would be what happened to the Haunted Mansion remake. It would be released the weekend after the Barbie movie, so nobody sees it, no matter how
Right.
good it is,
Exactly.
which is what has happened, actually. And I feel bad because the director of the Haunted Mansion, the most recent Haunted Mansion remake, is a queer director, and so it's probably very good, but it was just that was
Released
just a
at the
dead
wrong
weekend.
time.
That was just never going to like unless Barbie had crashed and burned.
Right.
There was no way Haunted Mansion was going to get the kind of press it was going to need to survive in the day and age we live in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen the stage version? Because the stage version of Clue, the stage, I don't know if it's a musical or a straight. I think it's a straight play, not a musical. But that came after the movie. And so the stage play is actually incredibly recent, based on the idea of this being a cult thing and less about just a recreation of Clue, the board game.
I have not seen it. I didn't actually even know that it was, and I would love to.
Yeah, I've had friends that have acted into it. I've never been in the city where it's playing for some reason, but people really find it favorable. They actually, I feel like Clue is one of those things that works as a Rocky Horror Picture Show style thing. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
one of those things where people can quote it and kind of lose themselves in it. And it has that air of familiarity. It has that binge quality where you've seen it, so you know it happens, but you can kind of still enjoy it, which is why I think it worked moving even from cable where it probably still plays somewhere into streaming, because even in streaming, it still gets chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those movies that every time you watch it, you either pick up on something new or you see something in a different way. So like maybe you hear somebody says something and you hear it in a different if in a different tone, or like you catch like I know that I actually just rewatched it last night, and like there were certain like looks that people would give other people that I picked up on that I maybe didn't pick up on the last time I watched it. So I think that's another reason that I enjoy rewatching it, is because I just pick up on different things every time I see it.
Well, we are approaching time, so we are going to shake, rattle, and roll to the end of this episode. I want to thank you for joining me, Elizabeth. I want to thank you for being a voice here on Everything Is Gay and the Straight Stuff. Now you're part of canon.
Yay! Thank you
Um,
so much for having me. This was so much fun.
yes, I had a lot of fun. I was glad to kick off Halloween and talk with you about Clue, because it's a very special movie to people of a certain age, and it continues to be very special. And I like talking about things that are special and meaningful, even if everybody has done an episode on it. And now we've done one as well for everyone to enjoy. Is there anything you want people to know about that you've got coming up that you can feel free to discuss? Unless it's like a secret project you're just like keeping in the basement.
No, no secret projects right yet. No, I you can catch me on Master of Rem, the Twitch channel, all the time. I'm there every other Wednesday and Friday for Power Rangers Centurion and Well of the Worlds. You can catch me on the Alternia Archives for Becoming Mighty and Morphin Season 1 of the Power Rangers podcast. After Deadlands, you can catch me there again for Prowlers and Paragons Sidekicks, where I am Riley Quinn. I had to think about who I was playing for a second. And then after that, Season 2 of Power Rangers.
By the
Yeah.
time this episode's come out, we'll be about halfway through the Prowlers and Paragons
Oh, okay.
run. I'm
Awesome.
gonna project that. Um, but yeah, you're fabulous to have as a
Oh,
companion in TTRPG space,
thank you.
and to be able to GM you. I'm excited because we have a couple of Halloween projects coming up that we can't quite talk about yet together. And one of them might be Clue themed. Who
Ooh,
knows?
that could be fun.
It's very exciting. It's very spooky. So we'll end on this question. Which of the weapons in Clue the film? Because I don't want to give you like the expanded universe of weapons, because like there's like a wine bottle in Bob's Burgers Clue or something like that. But which of these six classic weapons is the best weapon to murder with, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, hmm. I'm gonna go with candlestick. Because the candlestick has enough heft that you should only really be able to have to swing once to really connect and kill your target. And if you're wearing gloves, you don't even have to worry about fingerprints. And then you can just set it on the table and it looks like it belongs there.
Fabulous. And that's where we're going to end the episode with you explaining how by you murder people. So, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for more Everything is Gay, even the straight stuff. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.